Hello and welcome, and thank you very much for joining me at this session. I'm Vanessa Sallows and I'm the Benefits and Governance Director for the Group Protection business at Legal & General. And as Claire has already alluded to, I am also a clinician, so initially started my career many years ago in nursing, and I am also a psychologist for my sins. So what we're actually going to cover today is really to understand the gap between the employer and the employee perception, particularly around mental health, and actually looking at a few useful tools in ways in which we can actually support both line managers but actually employees. So what is the reality? Essentially, we carried out some research back in 2016 whereby we researched more than 200 employers, actually asking around particularly mental and physical health. We wanted to see where the disparity was between those two aspects. Some of the key findings that we actually found, particularly from the employer perspective, was that 37% felt that mental health was more of a problem, whereas 17% said musculoskeletal was actually on the rise. But what was really concerning was that 31% said there was no formal process for managing mental health within the workplace or mental health absences. And 42% of mental health related absences usually last more than 20 days. So that's quite a significant issue. We know from some other statistics that are clearly available that the average absences have actually reduced from 6.9% down to 6.3%. But mental health problems are actually increasing, and that's probably because of the awareness that's now more available. We're increasing the awareness, reducing the stigma, because we're talking more about mental illness and mental health within the business. We all have mental health. What we need to do is actually help each other when we're actually suffering from the effects of mental illness. Stress is now the top cause of long-term absence, according to the CIPD, and the second highest cause of short-term absence. We know that 1 in 4 of us in this room are actually going to suffer from a mental health problem in any one given year. And that mental health is actually contributing and costing UK employers £30 billion, which is absolutely phenomenal. And I'm sure you'll all agree is staggering. So I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience participation here. Is that we ask the employers, this is one key question that we actually ask them, how comfortable did they think that their employees felt in discussing mental health issues with a representative of their company? So I'm going to ask for a little bit of participation from you and just ask you to raise your hands. I've got 4 categories. So the first one was very comfortable. Is anybody very comfortable that they felt that their employees could come and talk to a member of their staff about mental health issues? Somewhat comfortable? Not very comfortable? Yeah. Or not at all comfortable? So what did the results say? So our research actually showed that 31% were very comfortable, 46% were somewhat comfortable, 20% were not very comfortable, and only 3% were not comfortable at all. Does that surprise you? Let's hear what the employees said in a minute. But there you can see that 77%, according to employers, are actually saying that their employees felt very or somewhat comfortable talking about mental health. So there is clearly a gap in the employer's understanding, just to give a hint about what's to come next. Because the employers that we actually surveyed, 83% of the employers felt comfortable in discussing general well-being, 81% felt comfortable discussing physical injuries, such as a broken leg, 64% of employers felt comfortable discussing mental health, and 77%, as I've already said, felt that their employees could come and talk to them. But in reality, despite the employers' perceptions, less than 10% of employees, when they were actually surveyed, said they would feel comfortable in speaking to a manager or a superior about their mental health. There's a clear disparity there between what the employer and the employee is actually saying. And I think that's quite startling, because we all know what to do from a physical health. When physical illness arises, from a very young age, we've known exactly what to do and how and go and seek help. We take an aspirin, we put on a plaster, we go and see a doctor. But what do we do about mental illness and mental ill health? Because that isn't covered in any schools at all. So what can we actually do as organisations to actually help put in place effective management programmes for both mental health and mental well-being, but also physical, so that we've actually got an integrated approach? And how can we also support line managers? Because they have a really difficult job in actually helping to support their people within the workplace. They aren't there to diagnose mental illness, but they are there to actually help identify some of the symptoms and signposts and help provide support. So some of the things we can actually do is, of course, an EAP. And those of you that actually attended the session earlier on saw that there was a talk around the Employment Assistance Programme. So there are very extensive EAPs that can actually help employees, and that can always be the very first port of call for an individual who doesn't feel comfortable actually talking to a colleague, a line manager, whereby they can actually pick up a confidential line and talk to somebody. And they've got trained counsellors on the end of the line 24/7 there to actually talk to an individual. And they can also pick up crisis management. If an individual is actually in a clear crisis, they know exactly what to do because they are trained in actually dealing with that. So they're working with experts all the time. And 98% of calls are answered within 20 seconds. And as I've said, they're actually available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. But what else can we do? I've mentioned line managers. We need to actually provide more effective line manager training. Who here actually provides training for line managers on absence, both physical and mental illness? Who carries out return to work interviews? So it's about 40 to 60%. So there are other ways in which we can actually support employees and support you as employers in actually managing some of these issues. So we're looking at group income protection. That is one provision that there are a number of providers that will actually provide group income protection to help support individuals within the workplace. They all operate early intervention. So it's about recognising really early key signs of illness, and often that can be day one for mental illness. Because the earlier you actually get intervention in place and a programme for that individual, you can actually get them back to work far quicker with the right support. And some providers will also provide treatment, and I'm going to go through that in a second. So that can be a clear added value. But we know the longer an absence continues, the less chance of actually getting somebody back to work. Does anybody know if an individual is suffering from a mental illness and they've been suffering for 6 months or more, their percentage chance of getting back to work? Just as a guess? 5? It's actually 3, so it's a really good guess. 3% chance of getting that person back to work if they don't get the right intervention and right treatment. And what group income protection providers will actually do is work really closely with the employers to actually pull together return to works. And particularly at Legal in General, we're very proud of the fact that we actually get 80% of individuals who have been absent due to mental health conditions back to work within 6 months. So what specialist rehabilitation support can be provided? So it's about actually having rehabilitation, vocational rehabilitation teams that actually have experience within occupational health, that have occupational therapists, physiotherapists, nurses and physicians who are clearly trained and experienced in dealing with mental health issues. It's also important that there is a very clear clinical governance expertise there. And what we, particularly within Legal and General, will do is we adhere to NICE guidelines. Insofar as the clinical governance we have in place has to abide by NICE and the NHS guidelines, which are very strict to ensuring that there is that clinical governance there. We work with experts. We actually use experts in the field of the speciality. So, for instance, when we're actually talking about mental illness and psychological problems, we're actually working with companies who are specialists and trained in providing cognitive behavioural therapy, EMDR, all the mindfulness, all the different types of psychological intervention that is available for individuals. And again, it's important that we abide by NICE guidelines and actually provide the relevant number of sessions. Now, NICE guidelines actually state that it should be between 20 to 24 sessions, but it's a bespoke, tailored programme for that individual. Whilst that NICE give the guidelines there, that is the maximum amount that an individual should have for a psychological illness. And I'm talking here about the stress, the anxiety, the depressions, the postnatal depressions, the PTSD. There is a tailored programme for each individual. So it could be anything from 6 sessions to 10 sessions. And the focus right at the beginning is actually providing that treatment for that individual, but with a very much a vocational rehabilitation focus. So the outcome very much is we are telling you, we're going to work with you to actually get this individual back to work. And that focus is right there from the very initial assessment stages and right the way through, so that the individual's under no illusion that actually the expectation and the outcome is that they'll be going back to work, because work is good for us, isn't it? It's therapeutic. Even though we might have 600 emails after we've been on 2 weeks holiday, but it is therapeutic for us. But that's good work in a healthy, good environment. Also, what's important is providing a relapse prevention programme. So it's all very well providing the treatment for individuals that actually get them better and get them back onto the journey to going back to work, but then what happens? They mustn't be forgotten about once they get back into the workplace. They need that continuous support, and they need to develop their own resilience and coping mechanisms. And so we can also provide relapse prevention programs, which are often digitally, so that individuals can access the modules online in their own home, in their own time. And the therapy provided can be traditional face-to-face in an office. It can also be via Skype, secure video, or telephone. And there is also now digital online therapy available with therapeutic support. So it's actually about the individual themselves retaining that control over their illness and actually deciding how they want their therapy, because that's really important, that that individual retains control throughout the whole of their treatment. So some of the things that we actually go through is the extensive, effective, bespoke support that I've already alluded to. There's no necessity for referral for GPs. It's all in place. In 2016, over 5,000 sessions of treatment were actually provided for individuals that were suffering from mental illness through the policies that we actually have. And we actually paid out 94% of group income protection claims, with the industry average being 81%. And that was because we were actually helping to get individuals back to work before the 6 months period. We've paid 1.2 million to eligible employees or employers on a bonus, because we actually provide a cash bonus to actually encourage the behaviour about early intervention and notification, and really to encourage the engagement piece. The average perceived cost for payroll is that an income protection scheme costs about 4.7% of payroll, which is expensive. in consideration to all the pensions legislation that's ongoing at the moment with auto-enrolment and has been ongoing for a number of years. But in reality, it's actually less than 1% of payroll. So it's about looking at the return of investment for helping to get the valued, skilled individuals back into place, and how you can actually utilise both the EAP and income protection and line manager training as part of the overarching health and wellbeing strategy for employees in line with the HSE requirements. We're also an employer. Whilst I sit in the group protection side, I also sit on our health and wellbeing governance committee. And some of the things that Legal and General have actually been doing in pushing the mental health agenda forward, particularly over the last few years, is working with government in actually helping to drive the policy. I've particularly been a member of the DWP's mental health advisory group, and actually helping to determine some of the policies that are actually in place. We've actually, of course, signed the Time to Change pledge, and I would encourage everybody to actually do that, all organisations to actually sign that pledge, and just pledge to taking small actions to raise the awareness of mental health within the workplace. Back in 2015, our chief exec, and we've heard presentations earlier on, it's really important that health and wellbeing strategies come from the top, that it's clearly leadership-led, and that's very much the case within Legal and General, is that our CEO, Nigel Wilson, actually is a great advocate, not just from mental health, but also across the whole health and wellbeing piece. But he actually hosted dinner with Lord Dennis Stevenson and also members of the City Mental Health Alliance, because we are also a member of the City Mental Health Alliance. And the aim of that was to actually pull together a strategy and plan around mental illness and mental ill health. We actually launched our own 1 in 4 campaign internally and have committed to training mental health first aiders across our organisation. Currently there are 40 and we are still training individuals. So within my clinical team, we actually trained individuals to become instructors and then roll out mental health first aid training, so that mental health first aid training is treated in exactly the same way as physical health. By law, we have to have first aiders. So it's about ensuring we've got MHFAs and first aiders, physical first aiders, at each location, but also for our home workers, because we have a number of home workers, that they can actually contact those individuals, because the difference, of course, with mental health first aiders is that you don't always actually need to see the person face to face as you do with a physical injury. So you can have those conversations online. We can use Skype for Business to initiate those conversations. And we are continuing with our mental health campaign. And something that we've actually launched this year in Mental Health Awareness Week is our It's Not a Red Card Offence campaign. So this is in conjunction with Beyond Sport and using sportsmen and women to actually put together some videos that actually demonstrates how we can initiate conversations in the workplace, because essentially sportsmen and women, the sport is their workplace. They are high achievers and they often have very high demands on them. And how are they resilient? We've seen a lot more recently with individuals actually coming out and saying, I've suffered from mental illness. So I'm just going to finally show you a video which we have actually launched. We also have a microsite which is the hashtag Not a Red Card offence. So please go and have a look, because there's lots of tools there that you can actually find to help you in managing in the mental health within the workplace. I'm just going to show you this video. Hi, Rob.
You right there, Rob? Yeah? All right, thanks. Good stuff. You crack on.
Hang on now, Skipper. Don't you go anywhere. Everything okay? Do you think he's faking it? This is not soccer. Is that clear? Can we rewind on that? Frequent headaches and backaches. Classic signs of lack of sleep. There's no focus here. How can your man perform at the top of his game like this? I've seen all I need to see. Thank you. Now lads, remember, you're on the same team. Coach, player, communication is critical. Okay?
Of course.
If you see something might be wrong, just ask. It's not only physical injuries that cause problems. And Rob, if something is wrong, it's okay to talk about it. It's not a red card offence.
Is everything all right? Let's go have a chat, eh?
Talking about mental health, it's not a red card offence. Emma, I've told you before, coffee beans in the bin.
You see at the bottom there, hashtag not a red card. That's a microsite that you will actually be able to find all the tools and that there. Any questions?
There are a couple of questions on Slido, if we can get Slido up. I think the first two, very similar really, and it's still, I think people are struggling with the idea of how you communicate that it's okay to talk about mental health issues, and obviously your video is going to encourage that. Yeah. But in another session today, we were talking about EAPs and the fact that most employees often don't understand kind of really what that's there for and how it can help them. Do you have any tips for improving communication and counselling offers or mental health services?
It is just literally about trying to come up with a strategy, essentially, that you know is going to engage everybody. So that's the whole point of having some of these videos. These videos are going to be absolutely available for everybody. They can be downloaded from the microsite. So actually that is a great way of potentially using humour on a very serious topic to actually start getting people talking about it. There will be 3 videos. But that's what we really want to encourage, is using the material like this and some of the campaigns that were mentioned previously this morning, if any of you were in Beth Rowbotham's group. It's about using those campaigns, probably some of the best ways in which actually getting employee engagement.
There's a lot of public discussion at the moment about mental health,
Yeah.
the royal family and
Yes, yeah.
But the second question is interesting, encouraging employees to believe that their employer is qualified to help them with those issues.
Absolutely, and I think that comes through with some of the research, and that's just about making sure that employees feel comfortable in actually having that conversation and just making available, there are REAP programs and that out there, so that the employees have confidence that you as employers can actually initiate that conversation. As I said right at the beginning, you're not there to diagnose a mental health condition, but there are a number of places and signposting that you can actually point an individual to. It's about pointing them to their GP if you can actually see initial signs or symptoms, pointing them to confidential websites whereby they can access charities such as Rethink, such as Mind. There is a huge amount of help out there. It's just about pointing individuals into that direction.
I mean, just going back to the website itself, Time to Talk's in there as well, and that's actually a whole microsite that actually talks about particular personal issues that have been resolved or been unpacked. So these are storyboards about people who've had an issue, and there are a number of different solutions in terms of what happened, what was the story about, what do they do about it. These are ideas to help people to re-signpost them to the right places.
And often storyboarding, having a persona so that you make it real to that individual, to come up with situations that the individual can actually identify with. That's really important, and you can actually see that in the Time to Change website.
You said that catching it early is the best thing from day one. But the income protection schemes, it's 6 months' time off.
That's when it's paid.
Yeah. So do you do anything? Do you ever work with employers before that?
Absolutely, that's the early intervention. We particularly want to know about mental illness at day one. So you've got an individual who has gone off sick with mental illness, and it's likely that they're going to go off, or you've got we can see trends. The early intervention piece is actually about looking and working with those individuals at the beginning. So we will triage them. Our clinical team will actually talk to those individuals as soon as we're notified, and we'll actually put in place psychological intervention, which will be paid for.
And even if they're actually at work,
Yep.
you know there's a real problem.
If you know there's a real problem, then you can actually work with your insurer to actually agree what that process should be, because ultimately it's in everybody's best interest that we keep our valued individuals within the workplace, definitely. So yes, you can do that.